everybody, welcome to the WhatCulture Gaming Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Tailford, joined by Ewan Patterson.
Hello.
And Josh Brown.
Morning.
And there's more Arkham stuff happening again, because it's been more than a few minutes, and you know, why not? So your initial response to me was you feel like you've been talking about these rumours in this potential next Arkham game for your entire life.
I feel like they've killed me. They are my cause of death.
It's been 84 years.
We must have, I've only been working at this company for, a year and a half, and even in that short space of time, I feel like I've covered this in news form, in breaking news form, hundreds and hundreds of times. What's happening today, Scott?
Well, I'll get there, but good to you, and you're on top of this as well.
Yeah.
You've done, most of the time it's you coming to me saying there's something new, we should talk about it.
I mean, because I love Arkham. Yeah. I do, despite Arkham Knight, me not liking it. Mm-hmm. I think that series kind of, back during when it first came out, it was a massive revolutionary kind of, it was a watershed moment in the superhero genre on when it came to video games, like with Arkham Asylum, and then potentially you could argue that the series declined. I would say it did. Yep. But I've been very enthusiastic about them mining that universe some more, because that series is so influential and not many people tend to realize that. Like, you had the whole advent of the vision mode cliche with Arkham games. You had the coalescence between like Zelda style platform and puzzle solving with that free flow combat, which is pretty much ubiquitous with the genre now. So
I think pretty much any third person action game these days tends to have the Batman.
Yeah, and to be fair, I love Arkham Origins. Like, I'm one of the people who absolutely love that game. I feel as though there's people are starting to reappraise it now, which is a really good thing. But one of the reasons why I've been so enthusiastic to keep on divulging and diving into the absolute cesspit of Arkham rumors online is because I'm really curious to see what they're working on. Patrick Redding, who worked on the old Splinter Cell games, he's the creative director at the moment. We know that they had a Suicide Squad game that got canned. We know they had another Arkham game that potentially got canned, but they have been working on something recently. So
where we are today, and the thing is, I don't actually believe this, but I use this as a catalyst to talk about the state of both the way that Rocksteady's handled their press over the years since 2015, and there's the amount of rumors that have come out of Warner Brothers Montreal. Because the thing that Ewan's referring to is Arkham Insurgency, which was the first major. Well, it was one of them anyway. That was one of the first major leaks where we were getting told about there's going to be a Court of Owls game, and we're going to be busting Joker out of Arkham, and then we're going to have this big explorative open world game again. The one that's broke recently is Batman Arkham Crisis, right? Which covers a lot of the same ground. But the thing is, this is written up by the Gaming Junction, which is initially what got onto N4G and a lot of the news sites this morning, which made me sort of like drill down and go, okay, what's the actual source? And if you drill that down, you go back to where they came from. It's a YouTube video of a dude who is pulling screen grabs from a Discord of a guy claiming that they were a playtester at Warner Brothers Montreal.
So basically, if you remember that scene from Ant-Man where Lewis is talking about all the people he knows, except he didn't actually know anyone this time, that would be this story.
But we did get the van, and that's what we're going to talk about. So I think he gets a van?
We have a van?
We have a lovely van. It's a quantum van. So the thing that I think is worth addressing is that all of the rumours across the last, because we're going into the fourth year now, there is always this weird through line of the Court of Owls reappearing, the idea of it being this massive open world with better traversal mechanics in terms of vehicles and giving Batman potentially flight. The Batwing keeps getting mentioned in these things. But I think it's also worth talking about the financial reality of the Arkham series, because do you guys think that we've had Superman rumours, we've had Suicide Squad rumours between Rocksteady and Warner Brothers Montreal? If they did, after all of that, go ahead with Arkham, would you guys be happy with it, or would you be like, oh dear God, this is a step backwards?
If it's Rocksteady, I'd think that may be a bit of a step back. They said they were done with sort of that that Batman, not universe, but certainly that Batman trilogy. So I think if they come out with another Arkham Crisis, that would be potentially a step back after 4 years away, because that is quite a long time. If it's WB Montreal, I think that's exactly what they have to do. They have to sort of keep that brand strong, and if it's just Batman himself, that's really good. If Rocksteady came out and it was, say, an Arkham Crisis game starring a bunch of other characters, that might be something else entirely, because it's not solely focused on Batman himself. I don't know.
Yeah, I was going to say, because for me, this is where I don't trust Rocksteady with the Batman character anymore. I just don't. Narratively, I think after Paul Dini, he did all the stuff with Batman animated series. He worked heavily on the storylines of both Arkham Asylum and City, and even though you could probably argue that those storylines had their issues, they at least had an idea of Batman. I feel as though Arkham Knight completely butchers the character, and that is just me personally. I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for that in the comments, but whatever.
I probably agree with you.
Whereas with Arkham Origins, there was a much more proper linear creative direction from Doom and Wenshu, Ryan Gletta, and I've forgotten the other. I think it might have been Corey. I've forgotten was it Corey May?
Oh God, yeah.
I can't remember. And they all worked on that story, and it was really, really good. And also, Montreal actually worked on a really good bit of DLC for Arkham Knight called A Matter of Family, which was a prequel in itself. It was all about Batgirl. So maybe, if we are going to see another prequel, which is what this rumor says it is, and then brings in things that don't make sense to the timeline whatsoever, then surely it should be Montreal. I would much rather Rocksteady tried their hand at a different superhero.
So the write-up on Gaming Junction states that the next game is going to be Arkham Crisis, and does state that it's in development by Rocksteady, but then says it was leaked by a Warner Brothers Montreal tester. So it's like, okay. Yeah. And then we've also got the Court of Owls being brought back as the villain, and we've got an open world map double the size of GTA 5. Sure, a 12-act structure. And this is the thing where it gets kind of crazy, because they're saying that different characters are included, like Dick Grayson, like Jason Todd. But if we're in prequel territory, there's no way that Jason Todd could be involved.
Exactly. Like the fact that they mentioned Dick Grayson going to Bloodhaven, he's already done that by Arkham City, and then he comes back to Gotham to help during the events of Night. And obviously we know that Jason Todd only becomes Red Hood after the events of Arkham Knight. So if this is meant to involve the Court of Owls, which was a thread that was established through Easter eggs in Arkham Origins, it cannot have Red Hood, because that would take place way too after, and also no one wants to see what happened after Arkham Knight. Because
that's one of the biggest things for me, is that I think considering if you want to do more Arkham stuff, you almost can't do it after Arkham Knight. Although they could kind of pivot and say that because Batman's disappeared and because the Wayne Manor went up or whatever, then maybe there's an opening in Gotham for the Court of Owls to finally reveal themselves.
The only way I'd actually enjoy a game set after Arkham Knight would be if every single member of the Bat family sat around on a table in almost Gotham style and was just there like, damn, Bruce Wayne, he really, really messed us over, didn't he? Because the way he treats his friends and family and that, I hate the ending of Arkham Knight. It's so bad.
I think, the way that Arkham Knight went, if you did the true ending, was that it was the assumption that Batman had somehow harnessed Scarecrow's weird fear toxin.
The whole idea, it's like a really ham-fisted way of saying, Batman's a symbol, not one person. Yes. But then also it's kind of like, it's clearly meant to be Bruce after the whole thing.
And so but some of the things do wrap back around again to the Arkham Insurgency rumor in terms of the enemies and stuff. But I mean, do you guys think that it would have to be placed somewhere else in the timeline? I think for me it makes more sense to do it earlier on, but that means that obviously a whole chunk of this doesn't matter. Yeah. And then, but if they do tackle the Court of Owls earlier in the canon, then you're not really doing the Court of Owls justice, based on, for me anyway, the way that I like to think of the Court of Owls as this massive totemic force that are underneath Gotham the whole time.
Well, that still works, because if you have them, the thing with the canon for the Arkhamverse is they clearly messed it up earlier on with the way they set Arkham Knight being so many years afterwards. I think that it's implied that Batman went through 5 Robins in the space of a decade with the way that the official canon went. I think you can still have that historical element of the Court of Owls to it. I guess it's interesting to me, because you have the Court of Owls and they're such a great villain, but bear in mind that they were introduced during the New 52, which only was so many years into Batman's identity. So it's possible to have that story be formative earlier on, and if they redo some hocum pocum with the timeline, comics, because then you could probably get away with it.
I would rather they did it, because I'm trying to think, I wish I knew off the top of my head, I should have Googled it, but the exact amount of years in between each installment, because there's more time in between City and Night as there was between Asylum and City, I think. So there's still some potential fertile ground to slot something in between
Origins was meant to be 5 or 8 years before Asylum, which makes no sense whatsoever, because he needs to go through 3 different Robins throughout that time, and then the Batgirl and everything, and it's, so that doesn't necessarily make sense. They can easily change that, though. It's it's just PR.
Josh, as the person who is perhaps the most done with this stuff, do you find all of this to just be tiring?
Well, this rumor in particular is quite tiring, and it's, you make of it what you will. But the idea of sort of, is it a prequel? Is it going forward? Is it Rocksteady doing it? Is it WB Montreal? For me, I'd rather everyone to be silent, right, about it, and just sort of let them do it and come at us when they're ready. Because, like you said, WB Montreal have had their difficulties allegedly by doing the Suicide Squad game and then moving on to Batman and then having a reshuffle, and then is Rocksteady doing Superman? Is Rocksteady not doing Superman? We don't know.
No.
But I would like to see what comes after Arkham Knight, I must admit. That's kind of a weird landscape, but I know you mentioned that you didn't quite like the way they handled Batman in that game, Ewan. I quite liked Arkham Knight. I thought it was pretty good. I liked it more the second time round, more than I did the first time round.
Okay.
I'd like to see what they do with that, because it's then they have just sort of the freedom to do whatever the hell they want, because it's then it's just theirs. Then we don't have the added baggage of everything else. They can just have their own vision and not worry about messing up sort of comics or mythology or anything like that.
Yeah, let's address one thing as well, because you were saying the reason that it feels so tiring firing is not necessarily anything to do with Rocksteady or Warner Bros. Montreal.
No.
It's to do with the wider rumor mill, which obviously we've contributed to as well. But it's that side of it where you're just every E3, it's is it going to be this E3? Every PlayStation experience, every Xbox conference, everything. We're always expecting the next big Rocksteady announcement.
Yeah.
And that's where all the weight behind is it going to be a Superman game? And look, they tweeted a picture of a cake with a Superman logo on it. And we always kind of get lost in that stuff. Yeah. And we kind of think that that's where it's going to come from. But do you think that because you were saying you wanted to address the fact that they're actually playing their cards really well? It's more that the fandom is kind of
it's like us. We are sort of doing it right now, I suppose, but we're going insane over because we want to know. Because like we all said, this series was so influential, and we've got 2 studios working in this universe that we haven't seen in 4 years. In WB Montreal's case, even longer, except the DLC. And it's obviously there is a ravenous sort of need for information. And I have a ravenous need for it as well.
Yeah.
But it's sort of at this point, Rocksteady in particular, sort of haven't really done anything wrong. Not that anyone has, but it's been 4 years since Night came out. Not quite.
We're going into the 4th.
We're going into the 4th year, and that's sort of about the average length between these major kind of sequels. I mean, I can't remember how long it was between CE and Night. I think it was 3 or 4.
4 years.
4 years.
And then we've waited 6 years, 7 years.
This is the thing.
6 years for Arkham for Montreal to do their next thing.
That's the one that scares me. I'm not really scared about what Rocksteady's going to do next in regards to the quality of it. We might sort of get iffy over the narrative of wherever that goes and how they deal with the characters. The thing I am a bit worried about is WB Montreal's, because we haven't heard from them in so long, and with so many reports of these cancelled games, that one is the one that worries me.
And plus, that's the only element of all this that was completely nailed down, was that they did have a Suicide Squad game in the works, and it did get cancelled.
Yeah.
And so assumedly that's because of the wider ramifications of the DCE.
I mean, I would say that recently we have now got a concrete idea of what Montreal are working on. If you've been looking at stuff that's been happening on Twitter, we know that there's a Court of Owls type shirt that's been going around. Potentially might be something to do with Wonder Woman as well. I've been combing through all the Twitter social media like a proper creep, and I've noticed some Wonder Woman merch sitting around on some of their desks as well, which is obviously, we had a Wonder Woman rumor that they're potentially doing something there. Apparently they're working on 2 games. I don't know. It's one of those things where when you see Marvel, and not to constantly compare DC and Marvel, but when you see Warner Brothers have had this really, really epic gaming franchise in their hands since 2009, and then since 2015 we've seen nothing. And you look at Marvel, who only recently did the Spider-Man PS4 stuff, and already there's talk of a gaming universe. There's the Avengers project coming along as well. There's a real danger here, I think, that Warner Brothers kind of fall behind, and this isn't. I enjoy the competition between the 2 publishers.
Yeah, of course.
And one good superhero game begets another, in theory. So it's a case of how are Warner Brothers not bringing these games to market? It's almost a similar situation to EA and Star Wars, I think, with the sense that we've had all these cancelled games that sound fantastic, like a Batman Beyond style game with Damian Wayne. That sounds really cool, but we've in theory, these have all been canned at one point or another. So what is actually going on? Because
the way that EA has handled Star Wars, obviously, because if you read a whole bunch of sequential reports as to which games got cancelled, and it seems like they're just setting something up one side and then canning it the next week or whatever. All those timelines kind of feel conflated. But the way that Warner Brothers kind of approach a lot of their IPs, the idea that I always go to Mortal Kombat 10 having paid for microtransactions, and then Warner Brothers the way that Shadow of War came out with all these really horrible money grubby pay for orcs mentalities, and it's I just don't believe that the developers had that in them. I think that was a Warner Brothers mandated thing, and I wouldn't be surprised if they are similar to EA in terms of they're getting all these potential superhero games off the ground. Hey, you guys work on this, and the DCU will all roll out perfectly. And obviously, that's just been so mishandled that they've then gone back to those projects and just severed them in half. So it's how do they then go forward, and do they let the developers take the lead on it, kind of thing? But
that's kind of fascinating, the EA comparison, because by the sounds of it, there's been not mismanagement, but certainly, like you said, cancelled games. But I think the big difference is that even if you don't like Arkham Knight and think it was a step down, I would still argue it's a good game. Speaking mechanically.
Yeah, I just didn't like the way it ended, and I hated the Joker stuff being.
Yeah. But I think sort of there's a better track record with what both WB Montreal and Rocksteady have put out so far compared to what EA have kind of put out.
I was purely mentioning behind the scenes stuff, the stuff that we know that is coming out. I know we've it's kind of actually a similar time frame if you think about it, because the first Star Wars Wars game that EA published was in 2015, which was the first Star Wars Battlefront, and it's kind of been a similar time frame between then and now, where you've seen loads of talk of like cancelled titles and stuff, and it's disappointing because there is clearly there is so much talent at these studios. Again, it's a case of like what studio isn't talented in the year of our Lord 2019.
Let's talk about. Let's just say that these things are true, and because a lot of them.
Oh God, no!
Arkham Insurgency and Arkham Crisis seem to read like a laundry list of things fan demands and say, oh yeah, this game's gonna have this, based on things that we all kind of wanted from Arkham Knight, and the way that it could possibly go forward. But it is, I guess, worth talking about anyway, just in case, because a lot of these things do correlate with older rumors that seem to have more weight behind them. So one thing that's quickly mentioned is that Gotham will be way more populated, which was a common like criticism of Arkham City at night.
Let's evacuate the city.
Poison toxin.
Oh yeah, everyone's inside because of the snow, guys. Yeah, I mean, we also evacuated literally every single citizen when the Scarecrow came around. Did you know that?
Apart from like 7 that you've got to pick up for the sake of extra missions.
Yeah.
I wonder how that would because I'm all here for a populated Gotham City, and I'm really interested in how that would affect the dynamic of actually being Batman. Because so far you've had this in every single game you've had this walled off place where only goons roam the streets and you do whatever you want. You're not like walking down the road high-fiving people and taking selfies with them like you're in Spider-Man.
Although to be fair, Adam West Batman game where you can do that in the 60s.
That's the solution.
I will admit that the second time I played through Arkham Knight, I played it wearing that suit. So I'm all here for that.
With his little belly.
I think that's an interesting point you raised there, though, because I've kind of been a big champion for Arkham to go linear again. I think Arkham Asylum, you had that really great Metroid-style kind of like semi-open world kind of thing, backtracking, plenty of that. I think Arkham makes much more sense if you had a proper story mode with the ability to go to different places and you just play a proper Batman story, because when you introduce the open world element, there is the element of immersion breaking there if you are just going around, walking around the streets as Batman, because Batman wouldn't do that. Yeah. So in essence, if you give the people the toys to do that, you're also entrusting them with the ability of not, breaking immersion, because no one wants to be gliding from rooftop to rooftop, they miss a gargoyle or whatever, they come flying down and some kid's just there like, my balloon, because that's not Batman. So
I think that speaking of immersion as well, one of the things that really jarred in, because I really liked that they had the whole tagline, like be the Batman, like be the Bat kind of thing. And I liked that when you were sort of like jetting around Gotham, like, gliding, hopping in the Batmobile, like mopping up some side missions, bringing in a supervillain or whatever, it did make you feel like you were looking after Gotham the same way that you look after New York as Spidey. And I think that's a good element to go forward with. But I do also agree that they lost a bit of the immersion because I hated the timeline of it. It was like all the events of Arkham Knight are in one night.
That's really another trope I want the series to ditch completely, the all in one night trope, because the DLC for Arkham Knight, if you play it, the Season of Infamy, all of that is meant to take place in the same night as well. So like you have Batman like taking down Ra's al Ghul, Mr. Freeze, everything all in one night. And it makes no sense. And especially, if they would, I can get behind the idea of an open world if they figure out a way of making it so that you are exploring this place, it's all hyper detailed, and they can make the civilian element interesting. I think it's just it's annoying because if you're in the Batmobile in a heavily populated Gotham, you're also trusting players not to crash in, because like imagine you're chasing after an enemy vehicle, whatever, and you're in the Batmobile and you do that cool little thing in the animated series where he sends a grapple out and it hits the lamppost and he goes flying around. What does he do that and you clear out 50 civilians there, and then Batman's just there like, oh no. It's like, you know what I mean? It's very, very difficult, and I wouldn't be surprised if they are going to go open world again, which they probably are, that we're going to get another, the city's evacuated again.
In Arkham Knight, we just had it so that his Batmobile auto-shocked people you tried to run over, or they dove out the way.
Gosh, yeah.
So it still was like a forced way to get around it. Something else they've got as part of this leak is the return of multiplayer from Arkham Origins.
I loved Arkham Origins multiplayer.
I never played it. Did you guys both play it?
Briefly.
It was really, I thought it was done by Splash Damage. Right. So again, probably another element of the rumor that doesn't make much sense because it was developed by a completely different studio. But it was really fun. I thought there was massive potential for that mode, but then like they could have had different factions. It was almost kind of like Battlefront, but with the 3 different factions, and you could play as the Joker and a Bane, and you had the different thugs going against each other. And during that, you had Batman and Robin fighting to take down thugs. There is a clearly good premise at work there that you could expand upon, like with more heroes, different maps, different themes of gangs and stuff. So there was it would make sense. I think
because what was that called? Like Gotham City Heroes.
No. This was for Arkham Origins.
Oh, okay. Because I was thinking
not the
big arena one.
not the arcade game. On about the actual like Arkham Origins had a multiplayer PvP element.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of with like the Predator style stuff, asymmetrical mode, and kind of like Metal Gear's thing. It's like one person is the hero.
Yeah,
they stay in the
I thought
shadows.
it was a really interesting idea.
Yeah, there's probably a way to make that work better if you sort of nail down the mechanics, because they mention in here that stealth will be difficult to master.
That's the only part of the rumor that really makes sense to me, because like if you think of Pat Redding's kind of history, you know, he worked on Blacklist, he did a bunch of other stuff. I think that's what Arkham has really been crying out for a good few years now, is actually genuinely compelling stealth. And like we kind of went back to that conversation on difficulty ages ago, you know, the idea between empowering the player and making stuff genuinely challenging. And it's all well and good making you feel like you're this omnipotent godlike Batman, but at the same end, you know, Batman is just a human, and you need to maybe, you know, make players earn that empowerment rather than just handing it to them on a blue and red coded plate.
That was that was one of the only criticisms I think of, well, one of the many criticisms of Arkham Knight in terms of how much they relied on the vision modes, where it was like, maybe the world's greatest detective, but you just turned up to a place, switch through your 5 vision modes, the smell mode, okay, I'll follow
and
this.
again,
well, anyone could be the world's greatest detective if I had that vision
that was my
and again, you know who innovated in that regard first? Warner Brothers Montreal with the crime scenes from Arkham Origins, almost like it was the best entry.
It is a little bit weird that even at the end of Arkham Knight, when they did the flashback of like, hey, great journey we've all been on, fans, everyone's been sticking with us, and they just didn't even acknowledge that Origins was part of that.
And then also the bloody remaster not including it. I honestly, I never get emotional about video games the way they've been treated, but I really thought Arkham Origins was given a dirty deal.
It does
both
seem
by
hard.
Warner Brothers and by the fan base, because it wasn't Rocksteady, and then they came out and released a very competent game. I thought there were definitely issues, definitely some bugs, and like, you know, you can argue all day about repeated animations and stuff. I think it's kind of nitpicky, but I think what Warner Brothers Montreal did was a very compelling story that they, you know, it fleshed out the lore of the world as well. And I think if they had another chance to do their own thing, potentially not as a stopgap between the two Rocksteady installments, and, you know, let Rocksteady do their own thing that isn't Batman, and then give Batman to Montreal, I think they'd probably get better success this time around.
I think so. I mean, like the level of like script writing that's in Origins is almost like head and shoulders above what's in City and Night. But there is also like a whole gameplay benefit to doing something that's a smaller scale, like Asylum. But it just seems like the way the industry is, that it'll go bigger. It'll be more about, because it mentioned another thing that's in here is that different, like I said, different vehicle options will be a thing. Like we can be able to hop into the Batwing and take off and fly around Gotham. But I don't know if that's something that you guys would want to see.
Maybe. It depends how big it is. I don't really want it to go into this massive open world territory like you guys. I enjoy the Metroidvania-esque Arkham Asylum style much more. I think it would be cool though if we go back to multiplayer for a second, mesh the two things in. If the co-op mode that keeps getting bandied about, you know, having players helping you out, I want to be up here in the Batwing, right, flying about Gotham City, while some great lad that I know probably want to use it is on the bike is on the ground on a bike or something. Like that sounds like a really good synergy to kind of.
I completely agree. I think the next element, the next evolution for me in Arkham is you look at it, kind of tie it back to the comics. You know, you have Batman, he's very good at stealth, very good at combat. How do we make that more compelling? And then also the evolution of the character. Why don't we really focus on his relationship to his allies, and then empower players, kind of like, again, like Splinter Cell did with the co-op campaign, where you had a linear exactly, and that was really good. And I feel as though there is no reason why they couldn't make the free flow and the stealth work well together in that way.
It feels like Arkham Knight especially missed a trick not
with the dual play.
It felt like it was more like incredibly primed for another player to actually be there, whether they were Nightwing or Robin or whoever, and it just never came to fruition. It was kind of cool swapping between them, but it wasn't all that new. It felt
like a first step towards something bigger. Because one of the conversations that emerged on Twitter after Ben Affleck left the role, the whole Matt Reeves new Batman thing, that they're doing a new younger Batman, likely the same origin story, whatever it's going to be. Point being that the conversation at the time was like, why aren't we getting the Bat family? It's something that the fans have been following for so long, especially in the Snyder series. And it's like, if you took that idea of like working with the character that you had in Night and take that forward on the gameplay side, then you have a way to do more team up moves, or you have a way to bring another.
Also, in the year of our Lord 2019, which also happens to be the 20th anniversary of Batman Beyond.
Just saying.
Why we could get Will Friedle back, get the awesome black and red bat suit back, Commissioner Barbara Gordon. It's the best thing, folks. Why not?
I'm not saying that would be the best thing of all time, but that would be the best thing of all time.
I mean, Kevin Conroy is an aging man, so if you need him to do the old Bruce thing
again,
then
which he already did when he was a young man. So there we go.
Let's talk about one thing if there's anything that you guys don't want to see. Do you want them to see them break from tradition a little bit, or are you happy with more of the same if that's what we get?
I don't want more of the same. I think it's been too long for more of the same.
Same.
I'd like to see
the combat. I'm the most.
Yeah, the combat and the stealth. I'd like the stealth in particular for some reason that always irks me. I don't want to be hanging around gargoyles and stuff like I was before.
Very formulaic.
I want that to sort of be more fleshed out. I want the combat to be a bit more fleshed out. It got to a point in Night where there was so many gadgets and so many ways to play that you didn't really want to use any of them.
Yeah.
You sort of had your own style, and it was like, why do I want to experiment? It was the same problem I had with Metal Gear Solid 5. Oddly enough, it gave me so many tools to use, and I was just like, I'm going to use the trank gun all the way through because I wasn't compelled to use it.
Inflatable snakes distracting my enemies.
Awesome in
phenomenal.
theory. Awesome in theory. I just wish I was pushed more towards those styles. I think there's a way to kind of alter the mechanics and yet still give the player a certain level of freedom where you want to experiment and use them. I would like to see that. I with you guys, I want to see them go smaller rather than bigger, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
What do you want to see?
I kind of want them to take inspiration from Telltale's Batman series. I want them to place a greater emphasis on the duality between Bruce Wayne and Batman.
Yes.
Because I feel as though the biggest mistake of Rocksteady's Batman is that they just treat Bruce Wayne as a cursory character. You know, it lends itself to the cliche of, oh, the real mask is Bruce Wayne, Batman's who he is on the inside, which is complete bollocks. So if they can actually make, that would also get rid of the whole all-in-one night trope. You know, actually have a story where you play as Bruce Wayne and Batman, a proper comprehensive look at the character that has innovation to stealth, that lets you embody the character in your own way. I really, really want that. None of this fanning around with wanting to put your own mark on the character with like fake new characters, because he wasn't a new character, was he? Arkham Knight. It's just a case I want to see them actually go somewhere with the character and not lend itself into the cliches that we've seen in film and comics and the
I think the duality is a hell of a shout, and it's worth pointing out that Telltale's Batman is a great game to play, especially season 1. The idea that because you're literally playing as Bruce in conversations, like talking to someone like Falcone and just thinking like, I'm going to reinterrogate you when I'm Batman, and you get to do that, and you get to be both sides of the coin. There's so much untapped potential there that would be great in a game with a bigger budget. But you guys let us know what you think down in the comments below. Do you believe any of this hokum whatsoever, or are you kind of with us just feeling very tired by it all? This has been the WhatCulture Gaming Podcast. I've been your host, Scott Tailford, joined by Ewan Patterson.
Bye.
And joined by Josh.
Goodbye.
See you guys next time. Bye.